Hi, welcome to Prop Talk, a property management podcast powered by ResMan. That is a lot of P's.
Yes, it is.
That's a lot of P's.
Alliteration.
I am so excited to have Marcus Wilson with me today. He is the founder and CEO of Pivotal Impact Consulting. And you might have thought this was cocktails and compliance, but what we're doing is having a cocktail because that's how I roll. But we're having a cocktail and we're talking about change. So it's cocktails and change today. And it is about changing your PMS when you can't stop the feeling. Marcus, I love that you came up with so many different ideas and they were all songs. And now I have that song in my head again.
Yeah, it was so many others and we could have really gotten very granular or grungy with it. But
we could. We're keeping it PG today.
Yeah, exactly.
So today we can't stop the feeling. We are talking about knowing when a PMS change is overdue and how to succeed in making it happen. And we know change is uncomfortable for people, so we're making it a little more comfortable with a cocktail. So we are live at NAA, so I'm trying really hard not to watch all the people go by who are curious about what we're doing. Mark is going to sign autographs later. What we're going to talk about today, a couple of things like what drives that decision to make a change? How do you evaluate your options once you've decided, hey, it's time? And then really some best tips for implementation. How can you help make this the most successful change that you and your company have ever gone through? So with that, Marcus, let's talk about some of the things that drive the decision to change.
I would say that there are several things that could drive change. And a lot of times it comes to do with possibly the price of what you're paying. You need to scale back, or you feel you've scaled up and may want to spend a little extra money to get something more. Or it could be a change in leadership, a new direction. And the direction that you may be going may not, the current PMS that you're on may not get you there like you want to. It may not give you enough information to get you. It's just new things like that. Sometimes it's just a whole new company strategy and identity for a company. I went through that several years ago. We did the whole company identity, the branding, who we were. We had a new strategy, everything. Once we got all that out, we realized the things that we were using just did not align with what we were trying to do. Our whole vision, pick yourself with pain points and get you where you're trying to go, get your goals checked.
Yeah, so it's funny you say that because we had somebody approach us today on the trade show floor and said, hey, I'm having trouble with this piece of functionality, or it's missing, my current solution is missing something. And, the sales team said, well, how painful is it? Like, is it painful enough for us to start talking about this process? Because you got to be in a pretty decent amount of pain to put yourself through that. And so I thought it was a really interesting qualifying question. Like, how painful is it? Like, how far do you want us to take this conversation?
You know what? That's a good thing you said about functionality, usability. Sometimes it comes down to capabilities, meaning you can have some very elaborate, very convoluted, robust PMS systems, whatever type of systems that may require a lot of a lot of programming, a lot of configuration to get, that functionality workflow that you want. And you may not have the team to be able to do something. And you may not have the money.
Right.
Invest getting somebody in. And, sometimes we don't really evaluate what we're trying to do and the people who are trying to do. I think that's a real big thing that companies must do when they make decisions. Yeah. Because they find themselves getting into what they call a rabbit hole.
Yes. Yeah. We've seen that where they go down a rabbit hole pretty quickly. So thinking about things, we talked about a lot of different reasons that could drive a decision to change, but are they all good reasons?
No. I mean, you're right. I mean, I would say one that I've seen a lot, especially in the industry, is, I hate to say it, but I'm going to just say it. We're having a cocktail. Leadership. A lot of times, leadership, because they are so familiar with a product, wherever they go, they take that with just for the mere fact of printing a rent roll. I mean, because they don't, meaning they know how to find their way out to get the reports. And they're not really dealing with the functionality, the on-site staff, the renewals, all the stuff, generating renewal, AP, paying bills, whatever. They don't deal with that stuff. They just want to be able to do the things that they can.
That's familiar. Yeah.
So a lot of times leadership comes in and they will balk at another system and just say, this doesn't work right. Wow, how come we can't do this? So what happens is that leadership can come in and just without even really evaluating functionality, usability, what we're trying to do, where we're going, and getting us there, just immediately want to change the system. Yeah. And say, off any issue, they want to change the system. And they'll keep arcing it for months and months until finally they change.
So they wear somebody down. Yeah.
So I've seen that happen a lot in this industry. But you really have to have fine points of why we should. If you're not thinking, what is this system not giving us?
Right.
That another one would.
Right. Well, let me ask you this too, thinking about, changes in the industry and things like that. When market conditions change and people get very price sensitive and they're, wanting to cut costs, I mean, is changing your tech stack a good way to do that?
Wow, that's a good question. Changing your tech stack can do a number of things too. Yes, it could be good where it can save you money, but it's all about whether you're...
What's the trade-off though?
Functionality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, functionality. You could save you money, but let's say this, the way that technology is today, if you are leveraging some sort of BI, data warehousing initiative where that ERP is just mainly used to capture the data and put it in a warehouse where you have a huge BI tool, maybe Power BI, Navigator, or some other tool that's out in others where you are doing manipulating reports and things of that nature, then yeah, you can cut back on your ERP system because you have another tool that's going to do the other things that you and you just leverage that ERP system just to bring in the data and bring it in a certain way that you want it.
Right.
Categorize it, things of that.
Right. Makes sense. All right. So we talked about things that could or should drive the decision, but what are some things? I know we talked about price isn't always it's a maybe on price. It's a maybe on new leadership. But what things should not drive the decision?
I would say like overemphasis on features, meaning that the sales rep comes in and shows you a whole bunch of bells and whistles.
Yeah, the shiny new thing.
Yeah, things, shiny boxes.
Yeah.
Do not let that drive. Chances are it may or may not work in your environment. That's the biggest. Next thing is trend following. Just doing what the big guys do or doing what other people as far as following their trend. Unless you are using and have pretty much the same strategy and goals that they're having, you have the same capabilities, people that they have, maybe, you probably can, but for the most part, you should see what's going to be best. Listen to it. Yeah. But you must have your own goals, your own initiatives and things of that nature. And don't do impulsive reactions. Just don't make impulsive reactions. Come in one day, we're going to change and we got to change within 6 months or within 3 months or whatever. That can be catastrophic. You probably can make the change. It's going to be detrimental to the people. I don't want to say detrimental. It's going to be at a cost, a human cost, because there's a learning curve that has to be adapted. There's a scheduling and resources of people who have to make changes. They're going to have to work a little longer and harder because they're leveraging, moving from one system to the next, another, being on one system, moving to another, learning it, getting the data, cleaning up reports, all that stuff. So that's going to be taxing on them.
Yes, for sure.
Especially in a short period of time.
Exactly. Well, and I'm going to say this too, since we are live, we're at NAA, we're on the trade show floor. Let's talk about vendor hype, because certainly there are some vendors that outspend others, but how often do people get kind of caught up in that, I went to this event or my vendor did this, or, it's the sales team's job to woo a prospect to some degree, but at what point do you go, yep, that's going to work for me, or,
I would say, you know what? And it's funny you brought that up, because I went through something like that years ago where vendor came in, they were great. I mean, the hype, the bells and whistles, they were really good. I have to give it to them. But the biggest thing, what we did is we actually sat down. We had a plan. We had a measuring. Each department had a measuring stick, I would say, or what we measured each functionality that we wanted, scale of 1 to 5, and all the things that we want. Each department, accounting, marketing, everybody went through. And we put down a number, 1 to 5. At the end, we added it all up, and it got close. And it was a very close between those departments. But the thing that got us over, that made it so easy to make the decision, was that company aligned with our mission. Once I saw that, I was like, that is the way. And since then, not only at that time, but even going forward, they stayed with them. They had great progress with them. They've done well with them. They've grown. And again, I think that is the measure. That's the way we should be making our decisions, how well they align, our goals and missions. but
Yeah.
out here. But yeah, to get back to what you're saying, you can get caught up in all the hype because they can put a lot of money, temporary money, to make something really look good.
Right.
If I was just out here looking around, I would swear that every product out here is the best in the market. I mean, right now, just looking with all the stuff that
Right.
put together, the things, it's beautiful. It's nice. It's my first NAA ever after over 15 years in the industry.
Oh my gosh.
And I tell you, it is.
It's overwhelming though.
It's overwhelming, but it's a nice thing. It's really, I mean, the way they have things set up. I mean, if anybody has to come here, you got to come. I mean, gosh, really. This is, I mean, I wasn't, I'm blown away. I didn't think this was multifamily. I would think that I'm in some high-tech fit. This is big time. This is, they blow me away, I would say.
Well, good. Good. I'm glad you were here. I'm glad you got blown away. One of the things you talked about, you said, don't be impulsive. You know, you talked about a plan, things like that. I found it interesting when you said, well, we had a plan, and what does marketing want, and what does accounting want? Yeah. And so when you talked about when new leadership comes in and they want to drive a decision, what we've seen happen is maybe it's a new accounting leader, or maybe it's a new operational leader, or a new marketing leader and it's part of the, well, I'm comfortable with this.
Right.
But that's one thing that I've seen that's not a great thing is if you have one of those departments who drives it, well, the needs of accounting are very different than the needs of marketing. And one solution may play well to one side, but not the other. So I think having that plan and being able to say, here's all of our criteria. If you think about must-haves versus nice-to-haves, things like that, I think that's really interesting. But I think we see it not tend to go so well if one of those teams is the one driving the decision.
Yeah, especially if there are a team with that leader is a person of high influence. You can become very handicapped at the system you use with that person. There are companies where accounting is pretty much driving the system. No matter if it's taxing on the on-site team, no matter if it's taxing on the regionals or vice president, I mean, too bad, you know?
Right.
And that sucks because you're not necessarily using any kind of strategy or vision of who we are. We're working together.
Right.
You know, I remember even making that decision, whatever, going back years ago, everybody was in it together. We each gave up something to get
Right.
And that's when you have buy-in, that's what it's all about.
Right.
Good.
Yes.
You know.
Yes. So I sort of got ahead of myself because I was going to say, all right, now that we talked about all the things that should drive a decision and not, you know, you've made that change. We're going to do it. Mm-hmm. And you hit on it. It is getting that buy-in on the strategy from all your stakeholders. It is getting that plan together. What's really important, really weeding out not being so focused on the shiny new thing and the distraction of the features. So I think getting that buy-in is really good. But the other thing is, and I kind of talked about this a minute ago, is like, what are your pain points? What do you like in your current system? What's driving the decision that you're like, man, I have to have this piece of functionality, right? Or, you know, thinking about the must-haves, the nice-to-haves, things like that.
Those are some of the basic or main things you gotta have. Because those are the bricks, the mortar that keeps them together.
Yeah.
That's how you make your decisions. But we have to be careful. Going back, you know, everyone wants things to look the same. Meaning you go to a new system, but you want your report to look like this, like another system's report. And I'm like, it's all about reading the numbers.
Right.
And their totals and their meanings and whatnot. The layout may be slightly different, but the information is the same.
Data's there, yeah.
And that's the biggest thing. So I remember that's something that sometimes people want. So having the right reports, having the right information, having simple functionality that you get in one, you want in the other, if they can make it better.
Yeah.
You know? There's some things there. So,
Yeah. How important is it to look at, you know, what's coming with a vendor?
That is big. Things are changing so much.
Right.
I mean, right now, AI is the biggest thing, generative AI, I mean, you name it. It's like people have gone so much in AI, but I realized that in a lot of industries, people have pushed back too. They don't want it in.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It can be a little scary, a little intimidating.
It is. And the thing about it is that we have to look at everything from AI technology as it's an enhancement.
Yes.
It's an enabler.
Yes.
It's going to help me to get these minute tasks out of the way so I can get to the meat and potatoes or whatever, the meat or whatever, so I can get back to the client. If you want to look at a company that's always on the cutting edge or always looking to make their system better, as the system is better, you're better.
Right.
As their system grows or enhances, or they're looking for better functionality or simplicity in processes and functionality, that means that's going to peel down to you. Hopefully you'll adopt it.
Right. Right.
A lot of people want to stick with their same processes and speeds and functionality and same spreadsheets. They want to do it the same way they've been doing it because that's what they're used to. That's why I got heaven forbid you want to change that.
Right.
You know, this is what made me here. This is why I got this position. That's why I'm always here. You have to understand that you should always have that continuous mindset. You know, continuous improvement, harmonizing the mix, you know, orchestrating the balance between people, process, and technology. It's a continuous integration of all those three, constantly. How can we make each one better?
What about things like the company culture of the vendor? Because you mentioned one had the same mission statement that you had, but I know we were in a deal once and we went to go meet with this prospect. The sales cycle can be long with changing a PMS. One of the things that they said is, we feel comfortable with you because while we've been looking and evaluating over the last 6 months, we've talked to the same team with your company. They're like, on this other one, we're on our 3rd sales rep. Yeah, and so they felt a little uncomfortable and going, well, what's that going to be like? If we're having turnover, is there a problem? You know, what's happening? So how important is that?
That's important. That's really one of the reasons, even going back to my previous example of why we chose it based on that, was because we had the same sales rep, the same support rep, everyone. And they were so consistent. The most consistent out of them all. I mean, they just really aligned at that time with who we were as a company. So, you know, the same thing here. You want to kind of do your work on it. It's like, if a sales rep, that's a good gauge of sales reps. Like, if they have a lot of them, that means a lot of people are looking to them. If they have constant turnover, that may mean something right there.
And you know, look, there's always turnover, right? There may be a change, but if the whole team that you're talking to, if you're seeing a lot of change, you know, that can certainly be a red flag. What about thinking about the user experience? And, you know, if you think about, well, I've got maybe some very tech savvy people at my corporate office, but what about my site staff or my maintenance staff? So should you look at things like the UI and the interface? And
absolutely. That's everything. You know, what is going to make it as simple and fast as possible for them to get up and get on board? You know, the easier it is for them, especially on-site staff, to adopt and get in and be able to use it, being able to forward things, being able to process renewals, you know, simple as that can be, is easier it is to onboard new assets, easier it is to get data in, easier it is to assess where you are as a globally as a company. You know, so the frontline workers are really, I would say, it's the meat and potatoes of it all.
Right.
Frontline, from maintenance to manager to assistant, leasing, and regionals. Those are, I consider, kind of like your frontline workers or whatever. And they're out there dealing with the day-to-day. I mean, we have it in the office, but the day-to-day, they're dealing with it. And the easier that you can make their job and the information that's coming in is accurate and it's efficient and it's effective, then you've got something, you hold on to it. You also want to make sure that those frontline workers, you invest into their abilities too, capabilities, learning new technology and things of that nature. So I just really feel that if you start there, the information's got to come in really well. The data's got to be safe. And if they're doing their job well, as long as the functionality of the systems that they're using, whatever, it's easy for them to adapt, that is going to be critical. And that's all based on user experience, user interface. If they can look at it and they can logically figure it out themselves, that's a bonus.
Right. I think anything that's intuitive, if you think about the turnover rate on, you know, site staff and things like that, you know, it's something that's intuitive is going to be easy when you do have those changes and maybe you don't have time to get somebody up, you know, trained right away. They should be able to very easily navigate a system and find something that they need. Although we do want them to get trained too. Let's be clear. I know you mentioned too, the bells and whistles, not to get distracted. It's pretty funny to me thinking about the wow factor in the demos, or people will say, oh, well, we have this great feature, even people that are trying to sell us software, right? And I sit there and I go, am I really going to use that? Like, it may sound great, but in my day-to-day, am I really going to use that? You probably shouldn't make a decision based on that thing that might be cool that you use once.
You know what? That's a good, yeah, you're right. Am I going to use that? Am I going to use it now? Am I going to use it later? Is it something that I have to pay for now in my whole stack, Or is it something that we're working toward? It does align with our vision.
Right.
It is something that I can get later.
Right.
So that's something you have to attest to as well. But you're right. The bells and whistles can really throw. We do it all the time. I mean, we go shopping.
Well, it's human nature, right?
Yeah, it is. You're right. It's human nature. We all love these facet things, these one quick little shiny bam wow things.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, oh my God, I never seen that before.
Yeah, I didn't know I need it, but I need it now.
Yeah, I know I need it now. And then we're skipping over everything that we have to do in order to just hit that light.
Yeah. Go back to that plan that you had, right? Go back to that decision-making criteria. And does it check that box? Or don't. The bell and whistle may be nice, but maybe don't weight it as high as your must-have things. Don't let it distract you from those.
But you know what I've learned? It's so funny you say that, because what I've learned is that we're so tactical. We're so get it done, get it now. We're so can't see the forest because of the tree.
Right.
It's our day-to-day. So we're always looking at what impacts me right now.
Right.
So the hardest part really is developing the strategy, the vision, whatever, because it's something that takes a little time.
Yeah.
It takes some thought.
Yeah.
It takes some wrestling around. I remember when we had to do it years ago, it was, I'll tell you, those meeting rooms, it got rough. But, those are the things that they're not tangible.
Right.
They're not tangible. They're goals. They're objectives. They're all through, right down there. You see right there where it is. That's where it is. That's where we're trying to get.
Right.
And because it's not tangible, you can't see it day to day. You don't want to spend time, because you want to spend time getting done the things that you need to get done. Right. But we have to make that time to set the goals and visions. Yeah. Otherwise, you just keep running in that hamster wheel.
Yeah. One other thing before we start getting into some tips and tricks is, the other thing we hear is the data. Whose data is it? Well, from our perspective, it's the management company's data, right? So they should be able to access it. They own it. And I know, not everything's created equal there, so something to consider as well.
Yeah. There were contracts several years before they came out with all the laws and everything guidelines. Mm-hmm. I remember reading a contract from a third-party ancillary product that was going to integrate in our system. And I was reading it, and it was saying that the data that they were going to be sharing, the data that they grasped from our system with their third-party members or their affiliates. And it wasn't like there was a list of anybody. They said these people will be sending your clients tools and things to use and engage in them. Okay. But that was all in that long contract or whatever. And I was like, wait a minute, do we want this? Right. But I know there are certain rules now that prohibit that. But you have to be really mindful of what you're signing, what you're bringing in, and who has access to it and what they can do to just anything, contact information, phone numbers, whatever.
Read the fine print.
Yeah.
All right. So I know we talked earlier about, price may be a good decision, a good driver to make the change, maybe not. But one of the things that I think is interesting is really comparing apples to apples, because, I know at least for our software, there are things that are included that are additional charges or additional products with fees, with some of our competitors. So I think people really need to watch that as well.
Absolutely. That's when you have to look at the company and say, okay, are you in this? I know we are in it to make money. But when you start slicing and dicing pieces, things that are included with others, then, you really have to look at, okay, are you really in this to be a solution for me, or are you in this just to get as much money out of it?
Right.
It's really, why would you take something away that you know that I need? Why would you break that down?
Right, right.
It's almost like selling a garbage can without the top.
We've talked about what drives the change. We talk about things to consider. Now that you've decided, hey, I'm going to evaluate. How do you evaluate those options? So now you've done your due diligence. You've worked your plan. You're ready to go. You're ready to implement. I will tell you, nobody says, I can't wait to implement some new software.
No.
Nobody does. So there are ways to make this a little easier and a little less painful for people. So talk to me about some of the tips and tricks that you advise your clients on.
Well, the biggest thing is that they have to understand the vendor, their goal is to set up your part of their database, your part in their database.
Right.
And they want to get that right.
Yes. So much easier to get it right up front.
Exactly. And they want to get that right. And their whole goal is to get information from you, to get the configuration, the back end settings all set up, all that information from banks, bank accounts, you know how that is.
Yeah.
All the stuff from security, names, whatever that may be. And that's their goal. Whereas your goal, if you try to put some of your things you have to do internally on them, it's not going to go well. They're not staffed enough to give resources for your company.
Right.
So the biggest thing is that you have to make sure you have the right people in place.
Yes.
That possible. And not just the right people, but do they have the time to?
Right.
I always say that there's three things you need for implementations from look at time and talent. Tactical. Yeah, I did say three.
You said three. I was waiting. I'm like, he's got another one in there. It's coming.
Yeah, but time and talent and tactical.
Yeah. So, you're talking about time, and people think about their budget and they think about, well, what's it going to cost me? What are my setup fees? But part of that budget is time, right? Because it can be time consuming. And so I think having a good grasp of, what is that expectation of the vendor versus what's the expectation of that customer? What do they need to provide? And is there one person that's going to, be responsible on their side for gathering all that data and getting it? Because what we have found is it's not just one person that's critical, right?
Right. Being a project management professional, I got that certification. That's one of the things that I realized that we're missing in multifamily. It's the ability to manage the scope, time, and budget. Money, the time of the resources, and the scope of the work you have to do. Because the more that you put off or the more that you forget because they don't have time to think about what they need to do, whatever, that scope creeps up.
Right.
When the scope creeps up, the time creeps up.
Right.
The time creeps up, the budget creeps up.
Right, exactly.
So you had this budget that you thought you were going to spend, but it comes out being more because of the inability to have resources to manage the scope, time.
Right. So if you think about that from a resource perspective, I know on our side, we tend to have a point of contact that gets designated, right? Like who's the primary point of contact? It may be a project manager there that they've designated from a client's perspective, but that person has a full-time job too, right? So what are some of the benefits of having an external project manager, having a client hire someone like yourself who can manage that for them? Why do you tell them to hire an external PM?
The biggest thing is to have that structure in order to manage it. Like myself, I use a number of things, everything from PMS, PMIS systems such as Smartsheet, Asana, and have so much experience in these implementations. I know exactly what to look for, what questions to ask, and how to set up an actual project plan. And it takes away from those redundancy tasks of communicating, sending out emails, reaching out to the seller to say, hey, I need these reports or whatever on a regular basis. As long as you're getting included, and long as you can see something that's letting you know where you are in the project, then you can continue with your daily work. Project manager and possibly maybe some analysts will help get in and pull data, pull information, put the right data in the right places in spreadsheets, make sure it's clean, make sure it's adequate, make sure it ties out before you upload.
Right.
Things that sometimes I know you may have they may have their favorites of people who think that they can do it, but that's double work that they have.
Right.
They may not have the skills.
Right.
They may not have all the tools and tricks and stuff to make it faster. They just know how to go in and long columns and take 4 or 5 hours on something that maybe only take an hour.
So there is that, and it's probably easier for someone external to go to accounting, to go to marketing, to go to operations and say, hey, I need this from you, or you have this deadline, or you missed this deadline. There's a lot of pressure on someone internally to have to go to a peer or maybe even someone above them and say, here's what I need. I think it's probably harder in some cases for them to drive that forward.
You're absolutely right. There is an unbiased portion of that you're absolutely correct. It makes it much easier for them to sit back and you know what? Sometimes the reception is better.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Reception is better coming from the CFO to the project manager than coming from the IT director or CI of the CFO.
Right.
Maybe a little bit. I'm not saying that, but
that never happens.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. I would think one of the other things too is we have this saying with our implementation teams, and I know you do as well, garbage in, garbage out. So we talked about getting that data. We talked about the importance of getting that right. This is a really good opportunity for a property management company to sit down and go, is this correct? Are there things that we need to write off? Are there things that we need to clean up maybe on the accounting side before we move that data over? And the other thing I will say is when you draw that line in the sand and go, here's my data, let's do this. Nothing muddies it more than going, oh, wait, just kidding, I forgot this. Let's do this one more time. Or, oh, wait, back that out, re-import this. So I know for us and, thinking about scope creep and time, you certainly want that, pull that data one time, give it a really good scrub, make sure it's clean. It just starts people off on the right foot. There is nothing worse than having to, clean something up for 30 days and then people go, oh, this was painful and look what happened. I think really taking a look at that data up front is a good step.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say even if you are already even when you're buying an asset and onboarding it into your platform that you're currently on, that's a big thing there. Because a lot of times going in and doing that due diligence, there's some data cleanups when you do your rent roll reconciliations, whatever. You go through the leases, do your due diligence, and go and figure out that, hey, there should have been charging for insurance or charging for garage and whatever it says right here, but they're not in the system.
Right.
Well, guess what's going to happen? Right. It says you gave $500 deposit, but did you? It's not in the system. Right. Like that.
So really take a good look at that. I know one of the things that we do as well is we require training before people go live. So making sure that as you're working on that project plan and that scope, making sure you're leaving time, that it's not just all right, I'm ready to go, my data's done. You got to make sure those site staff, your corporate staff, that there's time to train them and train them on all the products as well before you go live.
Now, that's a good question, because not question, but statement, because I find it that due to the time crunch that everybody.
But I don't want to train them too soon.
Right. But a lot of times due to the time crunch that they're all in on the work that they have to be done, I find it that training becomes another task just to check. They go in, sit through it, get maybe a little bit of it and just work through it until they can just say, okay, I took training. So I think it's also important to adopt what they're learning, maybe even break it down in smaller chunks so they can use it to digest it, especially if they're having to go back and do work.
Right.
You have to make it easy and adaptable to migrate.
And oftentimes, especially if there's a larger portfolio and we're looking at a portfolio-wide change, we're big fans of piloting as well, right? Now, I'm not talking about piloting something for 6 months. Generally, what we do is, 2-3 months, something like that. Pick a couple of properties. But I think, it's important not to underestimate that. That can be really, really valuable, especially if you're using it to gain buy-in from your teams as well, to say, hey, we've done it. It was successful. We've been trained. It's intuitive. Right. They really kind of become those internal champions to help with that change management process as you roll out the rest of your portfolio.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think piloting is so critical for the adoption, not only the adoption, but the champions, as you stated, but also getting more buy-in, expectations. If you got those people who piloted, such as regionals or managers, whatever, they can tell other managers. Now, and as they come on, they'll be, how can I say it? Piloting is an opportunity too for those managers as well, because now they'll be the senior manager on this new platform.
True.
Because they know it. They'll be the ones that'll be coming in for support and training sometimes.
True.
Whatever. Not only training, but just support with help.
Right.
questions and things.
Right. Right.
So it's moving over is kind of like an opportunity for some if they look at it. And the piloting part, I would definitely want to get involved with it or whatever, because I'll be the first on that and to adopt it. And because it gives you a leg up in that next phase of your career as far as being.
Right. Right. So one final thing on piloting, I will say, know that criteria up front. Like how do you determine a successful pilot? Determine that list up front, and then have regular touch bases to say, are we on track? Are we good? Are there things that we maybe have questions? We need more training, something like that is good. And I'll wrap it up by saying, like I mentioned before, it's not always rainbows and sunshine. Sometimes things happen. It goes, it can get a little stressful at times. I think one of the best things you can do is have a sense of humor, but it goes back to that why. Why'd you make that change in the first place? Right. What's the benefit going to be? Can you see that light at the end of the tunnel and see how your teams are going to be more efficient, or whatever drove that change? Like really keeping that in mind as you know that there's an end in sight.
That's part of that communication that you have to constantly do. It's not a one-time thing. It's a constant journey.
Right.
It's along with the journey. You're saying we're going here. This is why. We're doing this today. This is why. And that why stays the same. Yes. And it's put out there so that when anything happens, people move through it because they know why they're doing it. Yeah. They're not asking questions. Right. I don't want to do this anyway. Why are we doing this? No. Yeah. Know the why. So they exactly. Do it. So you have exactly. And hopefully they bought into the why before you even start. Yeah. So yeah. Well, Marcus, thanks for spending some time with me. It's your first NAA. Took some time out to come hang out and have a drink with me. So I appreciate it. I appreciate it too, the drink and everything. So for more podcasts, if you'd like to join us for other topics, other presenters, you can find us on Prop Talk, powered by ResMan. We're on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere where you go to get podcast content. See you soon.